Hello, my name is Vanessa Nance, and I would like to discuss an informative topic with you that I think is very important. The topic is media bias in entertainment and the news towards individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, why is this subject important? Why would I choose to discuss it? I'd like to start by stating that I have over 20 years of experience working in healthcare, educational environments, as well as advocating for individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. I've worked closely by monitoring, documenting, supporting, and assisting individuals that are living successfully with the diagnosis of mental illness in their communities. So the topic of media bias, its responsibility in the treatment towards persons diagnosed with mental illness. Why should that be important to you and I? Well, according to the National Alliance of Mental Illness, 1 in 4 adults, that's roughly 61.5 million Americans, experience mental illness in a given year. Now, what that means is that inevitably, you and I, our lives, will be touched by a spouse, a sibling, a child, a caregiver, a patient, or as a patient, a teacher, a student, an employer, or a colleague that has a diagnosis of mental illness. Now, perhaps you know someone who has a mental illness, or they have that diagnosis, but you're not even aware of it. Now, in either case, exploring media bias towards individuals with a mental illness can be very helpful for you and I. By the end of this informative speech, you, the audience, will be able to, 1, separate the media from the reality about individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental illness. 2, you, the listener, will also be helped to appreciate 5 important facts that expose 5 common myths about individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. And this can help put you, the patient, the caregiver, the student, teacher, the spouse, the sibling, or the colleague or employer at ease when you're interacting with individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. Third, and probably most important, by the conclusion of this speech and throughout, we will have uncovered inaccurate, harmful media and entertainment stereotypes that may have had an influence, either directly or indirectly, on your own views and treatment of individuals who have a diagnosis of mental illness and how you may treat them moving forward. The key here is being able to be more informed, to gain a fresh understanding and awareness about this non-too-subtle influence of the media on your views towards individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, in order to grasp the full measure of what we're talking about here, I think it would be important for us to take a little trip backwards down movie trivia lane. We're going to go back about 50 years. Now, granted, many of you in the audience are not in your 50s. Some of us may be, but you've heard of these films, or you may have watched them on your own television now that none of them are being shown in theaters. Now, what I'm going to do is name a few movies. I'm not going to cover all of the movies in the interest of time for this topic. I'm going to cover the ones that I think will really help drive the point home here. So, now, close your eyes. I want you to imagine or visualize what comes to mind when I mention the 1960 Alfred Hitchcock film, Psycho. The lead character in it, Norman Bates, appears to be a mild-mannered hotel clerk with some underlying psychological issues. As the film progresses, we find him becoming a stalker and murdering a woman in her shower. And it doesn't stop there, the disturbing behavior. Okay, now we're going to pan forward in your memory of film trivia. What about the movie with far too many sequels? We're talking about that 1978 John Carpenter film, Halloween. Again, the lead character, Michael Myers, escapes a psychiatric hospital and goes home on a killing spree. Too far back? How about the 1991 Jonathan Demme film and its sequels, The Silence of the Lambs, where in this film, Hannibal Lecter is a severely mentally disturbed ex-psychiatrist turned serial killer and cannibal? There have been numerous films about individuals with a mental illness going on a killing spree simply because they have a diagnosis of a mental illness. Is that a fair portrayal, or would you call that bias towards individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental illness? Has the local news media done any better? Well, certainly not. We hear on a near daily basis about individuals who have lost control, alleged to have needed some type of psychiatric evaluation, or had a diagnosis of mental illness. This can be school children. That's a common situation right now. Parents, police officers, even military personnel and veterans, or other high-profile individuals who are reacting violently to trouble in their otherwise private lives. When, if ever, have you heard of a positive news piece or watched a celebrated film or program about a nonviolent, successful, cooperative, engaging individual that has been diagnosed with a mental illness? Thriving in life, in the community. Can you name one? The only film that I was able to recall vaguely was that of Rain Man. And even in that instance, the individual was a gifted savant who had the ability to recall certain numbers, facts, and information, but he needed long-term care and supervision, often needing to be protected by his older brother so as not to be taken advantage of by others who might either make fun of him or just might take advantage of him. So it's no wonder then that negative or lack of positive scenarios about individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness, these type of stereotypes continue to confuse and misinform the public. When it comes to the myths and facts about individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness, the entertainment and news media have left you in the dark, perhaps fearful, maybe even ashamed. Now I'm going to share 5 common myths about persons that are diagnosed with a mental illness, along with 5 important facts about individuals that have been diagnosed with mental illness. As you listen, see if any of these ring true with how you once viewed or how you presently view individuals that have been diagnosed with mental illness. Now, these fast facts are coming from mentalhealth.gov as well as SAMHSA. That's spelled SAMHSA, and it is the acronym for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Here are 5 common myths and important facts about individuals with mental illness. Myth number 1. People with mental illness are violent and unpredictable. The fact is that in reality, the vast majority of people who have a mental illness are no more violent than anyone else. You probably know someone with a mental illness and do not even realize it. Myth number 2. Mental illness cannot affect me. The fact is that mental illness does not discriminate. As we learned from the earlier statistic, 61.5 million Americans experience mental illness in a given year. And yet the small percentage of individuals that are reported with mental illnesses that commit crimes is comparatively minuscule. So that's something we want to keep in mind too. Myth number 3. People with mental illnesses cannot tolerate the stress of holding down a job. They're lower level, lower functioning employees. The fact is that in essence, all jobs are stressful to some extent. Productivity is maximized when there's a good match between the employee and the working conditions, whether or not an individual has a mental illness. In fact, some studies from the National Institute of Health, known as NAMI, and NIM, National Alliance for Mentally Ill, show that there's no correlation or difference in productivity when individuals with a mental illness are compared to individual employees that do not have a mental illness. Fact number 4, children do not experience mental illness. Their actions are a result of bad parenting. The fact is, based upon a report from the President's New Freedom Commission on Mental Health, which reflects 5 to 9% of children experience serious emotional disturbances. Just like adult illnesses, these are clinically diagnosable illnesses and health conditions that are a product of the interaction of biological, psychological, social, and possible genetic factors. Myth number 5. Mental illnesses are the same as mental retardation. The fact is that the two are distinct disorders. A diagnosis of mental retardation is characterized by limitations in intellectual functioning and certain difficulties with daily living skills. In contrast, persons with mental illness have a health condition that can cause changes in a person's thinking, mood, behavior, and the intellectual functioning varies from average intelligence to very high IQs, just like within the general population. Now, this has not been an all-inclusive list of the common myths and important facts about individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental illness. To learn more facts about mental illness, anyone with access to the internet can visit www.nimh.org or www.samhsa.gov. Now, in summary, we've discussed ways in which the entertainment and news media bear responsibility for perpetuating biased views and treatment towards individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental illness. This has been done through scary films that stigmatize and even demonize individuals that have a mental health disorder. We have also considered how the local news also polarizes mental illness primarily through negative news reports. Sure, it's their job to report the news, but a step in a positive direction could also be reporting on positive facts about many successful, productive, and happy individuals thriving in their communities despite having a diagnosis of a mental illness. That's something we just don't see in the local news. Last, we have examined some important facts in the light of myths and unfounded views about individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental illness, possibly uncovering some bias that you as a spouse, sibling, friend, student, teacher, colleague, or employer may have harbored or not even been aware of from your own exposure to the entertainment and news media's biased programming. A final question in view of this informative topic we just discussed, and by way of conclusion, what will you and I do now that we have this information? How will this influence your ideas and treatment of individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental illness? Thank you for listening.